Hey friends, today I want to talk with you about something important. You know, a lot of people think, let's move out to the country. It'll be so much safer. I definitely like living out in the country better than I liked living in an urban area. But one of the misconceptions is that it's always safer out in the country. There are some ways to be vigilant on your homestead so that you make sure that you are indeed safe. So let's dig in. So let me tell you a scary real-life story that happened to one of my former church members. Small town in Georgia, very nice town, low crime, kind of like Mayberry from that old TV show Andy Griffith. Lots of rural farmland around the church. One of my church members lived in a very nice house in a very nice area out in the countryside. One day, the wife was at home in her nice house alone. In the middle of the day, bandits invaded her home, came through the door, rushed in, took her hostage, tied her up, took her to the bedroom. Thankfully, they didn't do any harm to her, but she was completely helpless. And as she stayed in the bedroom, tied up, they took their time, rummaged through her home, looking for valuable property and for firearms in particular. I'm so thankful that they did not harm that young lady. I'm so thankful that her teenage daughter was not home at the time to experience that terrifying incident. Later, when the police finally arrived, they explained that this was a group of criminals that were going around to different homes in the country, specifically targeting nice homes in nice areas out in the country where they were very isolated, where the houses were far enough away from their neighbors so that it was less likely that their neighbors would be alerted that anything was happening. And they were doing this not in the middle of the night, but in broad daylight. And it was at that moment that I knew that just because you live out in a nice home, in a nice area in the country, doesn't mean that you are safe. You could experience problems as well. And that's why after that incident, a couple of years later, we moved out into the country ourselves. And when we did, I already knew that I wanted to do some things to make sure my home was safe as possible. You can't make anything 100% safe, but there's some things that you can do. And there's some ways that you can be vigilant living out in the country on a homestead that will make it less likely for you to become a target. We love it out here in the country. There's nothing quite like living out in these wide open spaces. You know, I have neighbors, but they're way over there, and I have another neighbor that's way over there, and another neighbor that's way through the woods here. So we love having our space, and I have lived in a more urban environment. We lived in Marietta, Georgia, and just was so glad to be getting out of all of the traffic. We grew up in Macon, Georgia, not the nicest town in the world from our experience. We did live in a small town of Forsyth and pastored a church in a little country town called Smar. That was great. But living in town in Forsyth, still, you had a lot more houses closer together. And then we moved out here to Cohutta, Georgia. And look at all of this space that we have. We love it. We love having the freedom to have chickens, big garden, and we have all the space in the world that we want. But there are some things to think about. Criminals might actually target you because you live in a remote country setting. So we need to be vigilant in our homestead to make sure that we are always paying attention to our surroundings, and we are doing some things to make our homestead as safe as possible. So I want to share some tips with you today that we use and that you could use too. One of the first things is a keyless entry system. This is one of the first things that we installed on our home because I wanted to make sure that we keep the doors locked all of the time here, not just at night, but during the daytime too. It's just a simple thing. Criminals are looking for an easy target, a soft target, and just by simply locking the door and keeping the door locked, that makes it harder for them to invade and do their crime. And the harder you can make it for them, they're gonna look for an easier target somewhere else. So we want to keep the doors locked all the time. But at the same time, we don't want the inconvenience of having to use a key every time we go in and out of the door. So we found the solution when we first moved out here 14 years ago. We just installed a coded lock on the door to the house. And that makes life a lot more convenient because we no longer have to carry keys to get in and out of the house. And a function on it where the door will automatically lock after 15 to 30 seconds. So every time we go out the door locks behind us. But it's not inconvenient because to get back in, we simply enter in a 4-digit code. And now we can come right back in the house. We don't have to carry keys. The door is always locked and safe. There are lots of different code locks that are available on the market, and they've actually become even more affordable than we were when we first used them. I think the very first code lock that we installed was about $120. But now for that same lock, you can get it for about $50, $60. And that's wonderful. It's very convenient, very functional. Now they have come a long way in those code locks. We installed this Schlage lock just recently because one of the locks that I had worn out. We stuck with the brand Schlage. That's all of the locks that we've used have been by Schlage. And they still have a key on them. So if for some reason the battery goes dead on the lock, you can still use a traditional key to get in and out. And we like that function. We don't need all the other fancy smart lock functions. We don't, there are locks that you can use your smartwatch to unlock, or you can use your phone by a Bluetooth to unlock, or there are some that even have a thumbprint that can get you in and out. We saved the money because the price difference was going to be about $100 difference to get the smart lock. We decided just to stick with what we know. And Schlage has been a good brand for us, so we stuck with that as well. But there are lots of different code locks on the market. Take a look at them and you choose the one that you like best. By the way, I'm not getting any commissions or anything off this. I'm not sponsored by any of these companies. I'm just telling you what we use. A second thing that you can do is install security cameras and floodlights. A floodlight lights up the darkness around your house. Personally, I like it to be dark around my house, but when someone comes up, or when I come up, or when someone from my family comes up, I want the lights to come on. So the motion detecting light will sense that person moving, or it could be an animal that is moving as well. And out here on the homestead, when we have chickens and other animals out in the yard, we want to be safe at night. And when one of those wild animals comes up, or even a stray dog comes wandering through the yard, your motion detector light will go off. And that's enough to sometimes scare away animals or people who have bad intention. Some of our security lights, they're old. They were on the house when we moved in and they stopped working. So we're going to upgrade those. And we're actually going to add to that a security camera feature. Now, a few years ago, we installed a Ring doorbell cam. Relatively inexpensive and very easy to install. It just replaced our doorbell that we had on the house, but it has the added feature of having a security camera on it that is linked to our Wi-Fi, So even when I am in town or at work and somebody comes to the door, I get an alert on my smartphone. It tells me that someone is at my house, and I can check it right then and there. That has been so useful for a number of reasons. When we are out of town, it helps us keep track of when the pet sitter is coming to take care of our pets, if somebody's making a delivery to our home. So that's been a very useful and relatively inexpensive upgrade that helps make our home more vigilant out here in the country. And we decided when we upgrade our security lights on the home, they have a Ring floodlight camera. So not only will it turn on the lights to help us to see what's going on in the yard, it will actually have a camera on it that shows us, and we can see it right on our phone. It keeps a recording of what caused the motion sensor to go off. Not only will we have a record of what happened, but we can actually view it live. So if the light goes on outside and my wife is at home and wants to know what is happening outside, she can pull out her smartphone right then and there, and she can check it and see. So the second tip is to use motion sensor floodlights and security cameras on your home. The third thing you want to do is you want to have some kind of neighborhood watch program. We know our neighbors, they know us, we check on them regularly, they check on us, and we keep a watch for each other. So it's not a formal program, but we have neighbors that are kind of keeping an eye on things. And we try to talk to them and have good relationships with our neighbors, because even though we like to have our space out here in the country, and we like to be independent, we realize that people are not meant to live in absolute isolation. We need community, we need each other. I tell you what, your neighbors are a whole lot closer than law enforcement. Have an emergency preparedness plan, okay? Because it's going to take a while for help to get to you. If you live out in the rural country area, it might take 30 minutes for an ambulance or sheriff's department to get out to your house. It could take an hour or more for them to get to your house. So you're going to have to handle some of these situations on your own. Are you prepared? Do you know what you need to do? Do you have the supplies you need on hand? Do you know first aid? Do you know CPR? Have a plan. What if you have a small fire on your homestead? Do you have fire extinguishers? You may not be able to wait until the fire department gets out to your house. You know, they're trained to be quick to get out, but the distances out here in the country, they just make it takes a while for things to happen, even for first responders. So do you have an emergency preparedness plan? Some other things to think about: if you really want to make things secure, you might decide you want to put up a fence around your property. Honestly, we don't want to feel closed off like we're living in a fortress. So we opted not to do that, but maybe that's something that would help in your situation or make you feel better, or might be useful in your situation. Something to think about. Another thing that can be really helpful is to have a guard dog or a watchdog. Many people who live on a farm or on a homestead find that very useful. A watchdog is a dog that simply is vigilant, watches, listens, sees something out of order, they bark. You don't have to have a big, massive guard dog that eats lots of food and that could actually cause accidents, because they may attack someone who's actually a friend, and that's not good either. But simply having a dog that barks can make all the difference in the world. Think about it. If you're a burglar and you think, oh, I'm gonna rob this house out in the country, looks like a nice house, I bet they have a lot of nice stuff, and they're out here in the country, nobody'll even know that I'm there. So you come sneaking up to the house, and then you hear the dogs barking. What does that tell you? You don't know if that's a friendly dog in there. You don't know if that's a dog that's going to chew your leg off, or if there's a big dog in there that's going to hurt you. And why chance it? You might rethink your plan. You hear that dog barking, you think, you know what, I'll just go somewhere else. And plus, the fact that the dog is barking means that the people inside the house know that there's something going on outside. So maybe I'll just go somewhere else. somewhere where they're not being so vigilant. And that's the whole thing. Out here on the homestead, we don't want to be an easy target. We're not Fort Knox. If somebody wants to try hard enough, they can certainly get in, but we're not going to make it easy for them. Other things to think about, obviously, are things like firearms, personal self-defense training. If you have a gun, do you know how to use it? You know, you might need firearms on your property for any number of reasons. Hunting, protecting your livestock, self-defense. But do you know how to use it? Do you know how to use it safely? Because a firearm that you don't know how to use, that you're not comfortable with, that you don't know how to handle safely, could make your homestead less safe instead of more safe. So you need to know how to use it. You need to train with it so that you're ready to go at a moment's notice. Because when an emergency pops up, you're not going to have time to think about it. You're going to have to go into action like that. And so you have to train and be ready to go at a moment's notice. Anyway, so there's some tips about how to be safe on your homestead, to be vigilant so that you're not an easy target because you moved out into the country where it's beautiful and there's less crime, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's perfectly safe. Proverbs 4:23 says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Be careful what you let in your heart. You know, you think about your physical safety, and we do things to make sure that we stay safe, but you also have to think about your spiritual life. You have to protect yourself. Be careful what you look at. Be careful of the ideas you let inside your mind. In the ancient times, when they talked about the heart, they weren't just talking about emotions. As a matter of fact, they were primarily thinking about your thoughts and your ideas. And so when the proverb says, guard your heart, it means guard what you're thinking about. Guard the core of who you are. Keep it safe. Don't let evil in there. Don't let it be corrupted by the world. Because your heart, the core of who you are, your values, your ideas, they determine where you go in life. So let things only in there that are safe, that are good, and that are wholesome, and keep out evil. Keep out destructive forces and ideas. So be vigilant, and let's get out there and let's grow and be fruitful.